Hi there and welcome to my channel Russian from Zero to Hero. My name is Irina and I'm a Russian language teacher for English-speaking learners. I'm here to help you learn Russian in a clear and practical way without feeling lost in grammar, random lessons, and endless confusion. This video will help you understand three things. First, what this channel is about. Second, what kind of Russian learner you are right now. And third, what your best next step might be. Because honestly, one of the biggest problems in learning Russian is not only that Russian is difficult. The bigger problem is this: many students don't know what exactly is blocking their progress. They might study, they watch videos, learn words, repeat grammar rules, use apps, even take lessons from time to time. But after months or even years, they still feel, I understand more than I can say. Or, I know the rules, but I cannot use them when I speak. Or, I keep making the same mistakes. Or, I don't know if I'm intermediate or pre-intermediate student or somewhere in between. And I don't know what to study next. If this sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. A lot of Russian learners have this problem, especially after the beginning stage. At some point, you may ask yourself, am I bad at Russian? Usually no. Very often, the problem is not that you are bad at Russian. The problem is that you don't have a clear diagnosis. You don't know your current point A. And if you don't know your current point A, it's very difficult to build a path to point B. And it's also very difficult to track your progress. So, in this video, I want to give you a simple way to think about your Russian journey. Usually, there are four main types of learners who come to me. The first type is a beginner, and this is track number 1, Russian Foundation. Maybe you are just starting Russian. Maybe you know the alphabet, a few words, maybe some phrases like «Меня зовут» or «Я говорю по-русски немного», but you don't have a system yet. And here I want to say something very important, especially for complete beginners. Please, don't expect yourself to speak freely from the very beginning. In second language acquisition, there is a concept called the silent period. And it doesn't mean that you're doing nothing. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. It doesn't mean that you're bad at languages. It means that at the beginning, your brain may need time to listen. Notice patterns, connect sounds with meaning, recognize words, and slowly build an internal map of the new language before you can produce it confidently. Of course, not every adult learner has a long silent period. Some people want to speak immediately, and that is also okay. But many beginners feel pressure because they think, I've been learning Russian for 2 months. Why can't I speak yet? And honestly, with Russian, this pressure can be especially strong because Russian has a very complex grammar system. And you are not only learning words in Russian, you are also learning cases, verb endings, gender, verb aspects, word order, pronunciation, stress, and a completely new sound system. So if you're at A1 level and you still need time before you can speak freely, that is normal. At the beginner level, speaking often starts with very small steps. One-word answers, short phrases, memorized chunks, simple sentences, and only later, more independent speech. So please, don't measure your progress only by how much you can say. At the beginning, progress can also look like this. You recognize more words. You understand your teacher's questions faster. You can read simple sentences. You can hear where one word ends and another begins. You can choose the correct case in a simple phrase. You can remember a verb form without checking the table every time. This is also progress. This is your brain building the foundation. And this is why I never want my beginner students to feel ashamed because they cannot speak fluently yet. Fluency is not the first goal. At this stage, your goal is to build a strong base, receive a lot of clear and understandable Russian input, and slowly start producing simple language when you are ready. Because if you build the foundation well, speaking will come later much more naturally. And if this is you, your main problem is usually not fluency. Fluency is not the goal at this point. Your main problem is structure. You need a simple roadmap. You need a clear foundation. You need to understand what to learn first, what can wait, and how to avoid chaos. And if I'm being honest, at the beginner level, teachers often simplify a lot. Maybe lie is too strong word, but we definitely hide a lot of complexity at first, and that is normal. At the beginning, you learn basic rules. Later, in real life, you'll discover that many of those rules are more flexible, more nuanced, and more complicated. But that is exactly how learning works. At this level, you are getting to know the language. You are learning its logic. You are learning how it works. You are laying the foundation. And I think the house analogy is perfect for Russian. When you build a house, you start with a foundation. Learning Russian is very similar. The first year is crucial. You don't need to learn every Russian case perfectly from the very beginning. You don't need to memorize 1,000 random words with no context. Actually, according to the standard beginner level, your vocabulary should reach around 780 words. By the way, you can download a list of the words you're expected to know at the A1 level on my Telegram channel. The link is in the description. But when it comes to grammar, even at this level, at the beginning, you already need to cover a lot. At the beginner level, you usually start working with all the Russian cases. Thankfully, only in the singular form at first, but still, that is already a lot. And by learning cases, I mean 3 things. First, you need to understand the case system. What kind of tool it is in a language? Why does it exist? Second, you need to recognize cases in a language and learn endings for each case. And third, you need to understand the basic situations where each case is used. When it comes to verbs, at this point you already start working with imperfective and perfective verbs in simple situations, in past, present, in future, so all the tenses. So yes, you are expected to learn only 780 words, but a very wide range of grammar. And this is exactly what builds your foundation. If you work hard at this level, it will get easier at the next level. Because at A2 level, you basically continue learning the same grammar system, but you expand it. For example, with cases, you start learning plural endings. You add adjective endings in different cases. You use perfective and imperfective verbs in a wider range of contexts. So I would say that grammar and pronunciation should be a priority at the beginning. Again, imagine you are building a house. The house starts with the foundation. And with Russian, the first 6 months or the first year are extremely important. It is important to have a system and to learn things correctly from the very beginning. Because later, if you get used to saying something incorrectly, it is much harder to fix it. At this stage, though, progress usually feels quite clear. It is easier to track. You can see how your grammar tools grow. You can see how the range of topics you can discuss becomes bigger and bigger. So please, don't underestimate the beginning of learning Russian. There is already a lot to learn, especially grammar-wise. And if you're at this stage, if you have already learned the basics of Russians, started working with cases, verb tenses, and maybe even imperfective and perfective verbs, you can take my beginner Russian test. It will help you check whether your elementary foundation is stable. This test works especially well for students who have been studying Russian for several months to about a year and a half. Or for students who feel, I know the basics, but I'm not sure if my foundation is really solid. Now, the second type of learner is a stuck learner. This is track number 2, Russian speaking bridge. This is usually A2 to low B. And honestly, this is one of the most common situations. You already know some Russian, you can understand slow speech, you can read simple texts, you know some grammar. Maybe you have studied Russian for months or years, but speaking is still difficult. You pause a lot. You translate from English. You confuse cases. You are not sure when to use imperfective or perfective verbs. You can say simple sentences, but it is hard to tell a story, explain your opinion, or speak naturally. This stage can be very frustrating because you are not a beginner anymore, but you don't feel confident either. You're somewhere in the middle. And this middle stage needs a very different approach. You don't need more grammar explanations. You need to activate what you already know. You need to use grammar in real speech. You need speaking practice, feedback, and a clear system. This is also the stage where you can start listening to Russian podcasts and exploring adapted Russian content. Not fully native level content yet, maybe not everything, but you can definitely start building the habit of listening and working with real Russian input. The main goal at this stage is to make everything you learned before easier and more automatic. You don't want to think for 5 seconds before every case ending. You don't want to stop your sentence every time you need to choose between imperfective and perfective verbs. You want the grammar to slowly move from I know the rule to I can actually use it while speaking. That is what the Russian speaking bridge is for. Now, the third important stage is B1. B1 is the first serious level. At this level, you need to know around 2,300 words, almost twice as much as at A2 level. You start working with different styles of speech. You begin to read formal texts, and at this level, you finish most of the basic grammar system. In other words, at B1, you almost know all the essential grammar. After that, at B1 plus and higher, you will continue seeing different variations, more conversational vocabulary, more idioms, more set expressions, more fluency practice, and more work with style. You will also learn how to switch between informal and formal registers. But B1 is the stage where the basic grammar system becomes much more complete. For example, unlike A2 level, here you start learning participial phrases. In Russian we have причастия. You can think of them as adjectives formed from verbs. Participles answer the question какой? What kind of? The same question that is used for adjectives. For example, читать is a verb, to read, и читающий. For example, читающие люди более умные. That means people who read. Читающие люди более умные. Or написать is a verb and написанный is причастие. For example, я читаю книгу, написанную в 20 веке. And that means I'm reading a book written in the 20th century. Написанную в 20 веке. At this level, you also start learning full and short adjective forms, their difference and how they're used. And then there is another part of speech, деепричастие. You can think of this as adverbial forms created from verbs. And they answer the question как, how. For example, делать, делая, doing. Работать, to work, работая, working. Например, я делал домашнее задание. I was doing my homework. Работая за компьютером. While working at the computer. And at this level, you also start working with passive voice. For example, книга написана Пушкиным. The book was written by Pushkin. And as you can see, this is a serious kind of grammar because it's often used in formal style and bookish style as well. And at the B1, you start working with that. So if you want to find out whether you're already around this level, you can take my full Russian level test. This test is for students who have been learning Russian for more than 2 years, and for students who already know some Russian and want a more complete picture of their level and growth areas. And now, let's talk about the B1 Plus learners. Here you can already speak Russian. You can have deep conversations, you can express opinions, you understand podcasts or videos if the topic is familiar. But you want more. You want to sound more natural, you want a richer vocabulary, you want to discuss deeper topics, you want to stop using the same simple phrases again and again. You want to speak not only correctly, but also more freely, appropriately for the context, more naturally, more like yourself. You want to understand nuances of the language, you want to understand humor, you want to stop feeling anxious when you talk to native speakers. And you want to understand spoken Russian language and to speak a real spoken Russian. This is the type of student I often work with in my program, Russian Heroes. Because guess what? The higher the level you want to reach, the more words, phrases, expressions, and cultural references you need. At B1, your vocabulary is already quite strong, more than 2,000 words. But at B2, your active vocabulary should be around 6,000 words, and your passive vocabulary should be around 10,000 words. That is a huge jump, you see? The Russian-speaking world opens up to you. You start exploring different language styles. Idioms, set expressions, collocations, cultural references, humor, and nuance. And at this point, you don't need to do absolutely everything with a teacher online, with a teacher checking every tiny step. No, you're already a capable student. You have developed learning strategies because you have reached a high level of Russian. So in Russian Heroes, I provide a system. My students work on an interactive platform. They listen, read, complete tasks, practice grammar and vocabulary, and then I give them detailed feedback. Only after that, we meet online for a speaking session where we practice everything they have already worked on. Impressive, right? This course is called Russian Heroes because honestly, these students are true heroes for me. They work on their Russian regularly. They don't give up. They show up. They think deeply. They speak. They make mistakes. And they improve. So shout out to my students. And of course, with this kind of commitment and a clear system, they progress quite fast. Russian Heroes is for students who are ready to use Russian through my podcast, personal reflection, discussions, and deeper topics. At this point, textbook-only study is over. You're ready to dive into deep, practical topics that truly interest you. You are ready to stop only learning the language and start using it. This is why I offer Russian Heroes to B1 Plus students. It is a podcast-based course where you listen, read, keep practicing cases and verb aspects. Because, let's be honest, these are always a struggle for students. But you do it with more advanced vocabulary and more interesting topics at my course. We take one meaningful topic and work with it from very different angles. Listening, reading, building vocabulary, grammar activation, writing, and speaking. So, depending on where you are now, your next step will be different. A beginner needs a foundation. An A2 B1 student often needs a bridge to confident speaking. A B1 student needs to finish the core grammar system and develop vocabulary. And a B1 plus student usually needs deeper practice, natural speech, and more complex input. But here is the important question. How do you know where you are? How do you know what is really blocking your progress? That is why I created something called the Russian Fluency Audit. It is not a regular trial lesson. It is not just a friendly conversation where we talk for 30 minutes and then I say, yes, you should study more. No, the Russian Fluency Audit is a personalized speaking diagnosis. Yes, like a doctor, during this session, I listen to your real Russian. I ask you questions. I look at how you speak, what comes easily, what is unstable, and what patterns repeat again and again. For example, I would analyze your current Russian level, your speaking fluency, your case usage, your use of imperfective and perfective verbs, your verb tenses, your vocabulary range, your pronunciation, etc., etc., etc. But the most important part is, after the audit, you receive a personal PDF summary with your current point A. This means you don't just leave the session thinking, okay, that was interesting. You leave with something concrete. You understand what you already do well, which mistakes repeat most often, what is blocking your speaking, what you should focus on next, and which learning path is best for you. For some students, I may recommend starting with a foundation program. For others, I may recommend a Speak and Bridge program. And for B1 Plus students, I may recommend Russian Heroes. And if I feel that my programs are not the best fit for you, I will tell you honestly. Because the goal of the audit is not to push you into random lessons. The goal is clarity. I want you to understand your Russian better. So the audit becomes your first step, not just another random lesson that leads nowhere. And don't forget that you can already start with a free Russian level test on my website. I have a test for beginners and a more complete level test for intermediate and advanced students. And if you're new here on my channel, here is what I recommend. If you're just curious and want to explore my channel more, start with my Russian stories, my case trainers, and of course my highlight, my podcasts. Russian from Zero to Hero. Podcasts are really the heart of my channel. I love them. I'm very good at making them, so definitely check them out. The links are below in this video, so welcome to Russian from Zero to Hero. I'm very happy you're here, and when you're ready, I'll be happy to help you find your Russian point A and your next step. See you soon! Пока-пока!
Russian with teacher Irina. Russian from zero to hero.